Brought to you by Penguin.
The Nonesuch by Georgette Heyer. Read by James Lailey. Chapter 1. There was a twinkle in the Nonesuch's eye as he scanned the countenances of his assembled relations, but his voice was perfectly grave, even a trifle apologetic. "I am afraid it is quite true, ma'am," he said, addressing himself to his Aunt Sophia. "I am the heir." Since the question so indignantly posed by Lady Lindith had been rhetorical, this very frank and manly confession surprised no one. They all knew that old cousin Joseph Carver had left his fortune to Waldo, and when Lady Lindith had summoned him to account for himself, she had acted on the impulse of the moment, and with no expectation of hearing the news denied. Nor had she any very real expectation of Waldo's renouncing the bequest in favour of her only child. She naturally felt that no worthier heir to eccentric cousin Joseph's estate existed than Julian, and she had done her best to introduce the noble orphan to him, even enduring the rigours of a week spent at Harrogate, when Julian had been an engaging child in nankeens and a frilled shirt, and she had tried, quite unavailingly, to gain entrance to Broom Hall. 3 times had she driven out from Harrogate, the bored but docile little boy beside her, only to be told twice by cousin Joseph's butler that the master was not feeling clever enough to receive visitors, and once that the master would thank her not to come pestering him, because he didn't want to see her, nor her son, nor anyone else. Inquiry had elicited the information that the only visitor ever admitted into the house was the doctor. Local opinion was divided, charitable persons maintaining that a disappointment suffered in his youth was responsible for this churlishness, others asserting that he was a muckworm who grudged every groat he was obliged to spend. Having had the opportunity to perceive the neglected condition of the grounds of Broom Hall, Lady Lindith had ranged herself with the majority. A suspicion that cousin Joseph might not be as plump in the pocket as was supposed had occurred only to be dismissed. Broom Hall, though greatly inferior in style and size to young Lord Lindith's seat in the Midlands, was a very respectable house, with probably as many as 30 bedrooms. It did not stand in a park, but its gardens appeared to be extensive, and she was credibly informed that most of the surrounding land belonged to the estate. She had left Harrogate much inclined to think that cousin Joseph's fortune was considerably larger than had previously been supposed. She did not grudge it to him, but she would have thought herself a very unnatural parent had she not made a push to secure it for her son. So she had swallowed her resentment at the treatment she had received, and had continued, throughout the succeeding years, to send Joseph small Christmas gifts and periodical letters, affectionately inquiring after the state of his health, and regaling him with accounts of Julian's virtues, beauty, and scholastic progress. And after all her pains, he had left his entire estate to Waldo, who was neither the most senior of his relations nor the one who bore his name. The most senior of the 3 cousins gathered together in Lady Lindith's drawing-room was George Wingham, the son of her ladyship's eldest sister. He was a very worthy man, however prosy. She was not particularly fond of him, but she thought she could have borne it better had cousin Joseph made him his heir, for she was obliged to acknowledge that his seniority gave him a certain amount of right to the bequest. Not, of course, so good a right as Lawrence Carver. Lady Lindith held Lawrence, the youngest of her nephews, in contempt and dislike, but she hoped she was a just woman, and she felt she could have supported with equanimity his succession to a fortune which he would have lost no time in dissipating. But that cousin Joseph, ignoring the claims of George and Lawrence, and her beloved Julian, should have named Waldo Hawkridge as his heir, was so intolerable that had she been of a nervous disposition, she thought she must have succumbed to spasms when she had first heard the incredible news. As it was...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?